Today's cool vid is actually 2 of 3, although it happened later in the month of October, morning, probably around maybe the 29th or 30th, last few days. About 10 days after Roger got his very important footage, most important wildlife footage of all time. Glen Thomas, about 50 miles away from the Dallas. I hope I said that right. Another town. I'll put that in the subtitle there. Glen Thomas, logger, working away in the morning, need to take a break. Went for about a mile hike on a trail, and he came across a very rare sight of 3 Sasquatch digging for their breakfast, creating a big rock pile as they pulled rocks out of the ground. A big male, a female, 6-foot female, male probably around 8 feet, and then a little juvie about halfway up, about a 3-foot juvie halfway up to mom's waist, or not even at mom's waist. The important thing about this is a multiple Sasquatch sighting, a little group dynamic of how they interact, and I'll get more into that in the narrative.
Right, so on a chilly morning, late in October, maybe around the 30th, 1967, Glen Thomas, chainsaw operator, was working away, and he decided to take a break and go for a walk on a trail. This is at about the 5,000 foot elevation, about 50 miles from the Dallas, if I said that right. So anyway, he hikes about a mile on the trail. He comes to an opening where there's some, I guess, a bit of a rock slide, and he stops, and there's a clearing for the rock slide, and then goes into a clearing area, and he notices something peculiar. In the middle of the clearing, in full sun, there's 3 biped figures, all covered in hair. What appears to be a male, maybe an 8-foot male, 6-foot or so female, and a juvie about 3 feet tall or so. It didn't really come up to the female's waist. And so he knelt down in the grass, and he was watching these figures, and they were pulling out rock, digging out rock, and slinging them back, in making piles, making stacks of rock, and he was really curious about them. And then it became apparent what they were up to. They were hunting marmots, I guess, or rock rabbits, and whenever they'd find one, they'd pull it out, sniff it, and then bite it, usually 1 or 2 bites, and cram them all in their mouths, and then continue looking for more. Now, one of the interesting things that Glen Thomas, the witness, noticed was that the adults didn't help the juvie. They were all on their own for morning breakfast. So he was watching away, and this encounter lasted about 15 minutes. He's watching them dig out these rocks, and one of the other things he notices is their hair, and the hair on the female and the little juvie weren't neat, but they weren't as messy, as shaggy as the big adult male. The male had really shaggy hair off the shoulders, and when he was watching them sling out these boulders the size of, I don't know, maybe the old style microwaves or something, and the first microwaves. And one thing that astonished him was that the ease that they were doing this. And these are boulders that men could not lift very easily, and they were throwing them back like softballs. One of the other interesting things he noticed about what they were doing was they were using their hand in like a wraparound position and not grasping like with the thumb around with the opposed thumb. Um, so anyway, he was watching them for about 15 minutes like that, and he knelt down. He's watching them do this, having their morning breakfast, and the big male came up, stood erect because he caught like a nest of them, and he was taking his time smelling them and then eating, cramming them in his mouth, a whole little nest of them. And then because he stood erect, I guess he must have caught Mr. Thomas's scent on the wind, and they all turned and looked at him in his where he was. Mr. Thomas, I guess he's no good anymore hiding, so he stood up, and then the Sasquatch, once they realized what they were doing, or what he was doing, they all just made their way over the rock pile they created and wandered back into the tree line. Now that's pretty awesome, and here's just some shots of interesting area and what might be eye shine there underneath the tree. Um, he was quite amazed by this, that these things were able to just dig through the ground with no ease, and he's quite startled, and it's like, I guess it's kind of like what Bob Gimlin said, kind of surreal catching these creatures in the open. Right, so Estacada, if I say that right, or I probably butchered another name. No offense, Oregon people, got that wrong too. Anyway, it's a beautiful little town, Mount Hood there, I think, and it's great for tourism and hiking. And I mentioned about Bob Gimlin, surreal experience catching them in the open. I've seen them in the open, but they freeze with me unless it's a juvie, and then they run away. But another famous resident is Autumn Williams. She dropped out of the site, I don't know, a few years back after she wrote her book, and then Moneymaker and others gave her a hard time, and I guess she had enough. But there she is with late great John Green. There's Bob again, and I'm dedicating this video to Autumn Williams. I'd really like to see the First Lady of Bigfooting get back on the scene. We miss her perspective. I miss her perspective. And I think that'd be great if someone like her were to come back. Thanks for watching.